Hey everyone, and welcome to Mrs. Kropp's Classroom. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about character development, more specifically the difference between a static and a dynamic character. So when you talk about characters in a story, there's really two main types. You have a dynamic character or you have a static character. Now, this has nothing to do with who the person is in the story. What it has to do with is, do they change or not? Well, everybody changes a little bit, Miss Kropp, right? Not really. When we say change, we don't mean goes from being a baby to an adult. We don't mean grows up. We don't even mean has a heartache or broken heart or loses a job or goes from rich to poor or poor to rich. Well, geez, Miss Kropp, what other kind of change is there? Well, we're talking about a moral change, a change with the person who you are internally, with how you think about things and with how you see the world. Okay, so wouldn't that be most characters though? No, it wouldn't. Most of the time you will find that you have a pretty 50-50 split when it comes to the type of characters you have. There are wonderful, long stories with very static characters who don't really have this moral change. And then you also have really great stories where the characters go from being this one kind of character and then just changing dramatically at the end. The token example of this is going to be Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge in The Christmas Carol. You know, at the beginning of the story, he is super miserly. He's hoarding all this money and he doesn't really want to share, and he doesn't like poor people, and he doesn't want to help anybody ever, right? Well, then the ghosts come in and make him see the error of his ways and let him know that he's being a real bad person and that he's probably going to end up going somewhere not so nice. And then by the end of the story, he's decided, okay, maybe I need to be better in the world, share the wealth and all that kind of stuff. And so by the end of the story, he's, going and spending all his money on a nice big Christmas dinner for the very poor family that he has in his employment, right? So dynamic change. He changed. I mean, the actual time frame of the movie itself movie. The story, written by Charles Dickinson, is only 24 hours. In 24 hours, he has this huge, epic, dynamic change. Whereas, for example, in Harry Potter, we have a story that starts when the boy is born and then doesn't end until he's 18. So this is going to be what you would expect to have a dynamic change. Surely in 18 years you change dynamically some point, right? But he doesn't. Harry Potter stays the same morally. He obviously grows up and he gets smart and he learns, the power of love and his friendship, and he goes through all these very important conflict changes. He succeeds and he fails and all these things happen, but morally, he's the same moral person that he was at the beginning, at the end. He doesn't really have this huge mental shift where he's like suddenly realizing the light, right? So let's think about some other dynamic characters. We have Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars. He does it twice, okay? So at the beginning or the middle, it's really however you want to talk about Star Wars, but when Anakin Skywalker is young and a Jedi, he goes through a dynamic shift where Palpatine has suddenly made him see that the dark side is actually the good thing and that he wants to be able to save his mom, and so he kills all the other Jedi and he becomes the Sith, right? So that is his first moral change. Then, later on, when he's all super old and his son, Luke Skywalker, comes in to be the Jedi, Darth Vader then, who is Anakin Skywalker, decides that he's going to shift back to the good side and he wants to save his son. So in that act, he is having a second dynamic shift in the storyline, right? So, Luke Skywalker, on the other hand, does not have a dynamic change. He is 100% all for the good, Jedi, all that kind of stuff. So he's a static character. So Let's look at my last example, which is going to be, second to last example. We have The Pursuit of Happiness. This is a film where Will Smith is the main character, who is the father of a young child and a husband. Now, there at the very beginning of the story, we see a very dramatic exposition set up where, the main character, Will Smith's character, and his wife are happy. She's pregnant, they have a baby, they're working, and then they very slowly become very poor, and she's unhappy, and then she leaves. While all this is happening, this is not a dynamic change in the film. This is all just the setup, the exposition for the story. Now, Will Smith's character goes through a huge amount of turmoil and conflict and strife and depression and difficult situations, right? But he doesn't actually shift morally. He is of his own sound morals from the beginning to the end. And while he's very poor and he almost breaks at one point in the story, he doesn't actually change his moral beliefs. Morally, he's a static character. He changed a lot in the sense that he went from very broke to finally having a shot, from almost giving up to continuing the fight, but his morals didn't change. Therefore, static character. And then our last example is going to be Iron Man, Tony Stark. So Tony Stark starts off the movie at the very beginning of the story. He is a billionaire philanthropist who makes a lot of weapons, right? So he builds all these weapons and he makes lots of money, and he doesn't really care about war, in the sense that it's bad. He doesn't really have that connection. He doesn't care. He just wants to build his weapons and continue to make lots of money. So then somewhere in the beginning of the story, but it's not the exposition, we're actually into the story now, he gets blown up, taken into a cave, kidnapped, and he realizes that all his weapons are being used on American soldiers, the soldiers he built the weapons for, and that all of a sudden upsets him. So he has this big moral shift where he no longer wants to build weapons, he wants to build things to protect people. He doesn't want to be in the war game anymore. So this is going to be our moral shift. Now, Tony Stark goes through many, many, many more dynamic shifts in the whole Iron Man sagas, but that's the only one I'm talking about today. So looking at these very popular examples, I want you to think the next time you're reading a story or watching a movie or a TV show or really anything, and I want you to think, is that a static or a dynamic character? Does this person change morally, or do they still have the same belief system and they just went through a lot of conflict? Now, finally, I'm going to give this little tidbit to you. You might be wondering, Miss Kropp, why do I care about a static or a dynamic character? Well, a lot of times, if you have a dynamic character in a story, the change that character goes through is going to have a huge significance to your theme of the story. So when you do look at the next movie, TV show, or book that you're looking at, and you determine whether your character is static or dynamic, if your character is dynamic, I want you to think, so how did they change? And then I want you to think, was that the theme? Is the change that they undergo related to the theme? Because the answer is yes, 100%, always. The change is always related to the theme. So again, if you can figure out if you have dynamic characters, you can help yourself get that much closer to coming up with a perfect theme to impress your English teachers, including me, if you have me. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Chalk It Up to Kropp. If you have more questions about character, dynamic versus static, or any other character question, please leave us a comment or check out some of our other videos. And as always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.